I want y'all to listen.
Hey, it's Crystal, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a deep dive into the movie Baby Boy. Now, Baby Boy was produced and filmed in 2001. It was produced and directed by John Singleton. He is responsible for that ghetto blaxploitation movie Boys in the Hood from 1991. I want to focus today on the main four characters: Jody, Yvette, Juanita, and Peanut. These characters embody the entire problems and issues and woes of the Black community in a way that I could never articulate by just spitting off the facts. So I thought I would use this movie as an example for what's wrong with our community and why it's been so normalized. Now, of course, I watched the movie back in 2001, but it was 21 years ago, and we're all different people, right? We've all changed. We hopefully have a more mature eye when we look at things. So when the movie opens, Baby Boy, Jody, played by Tyrese, is encompassed and ensconced in a womb, a fully grown man in an embryonic sac with an umbilical cord, softly nestled and safe and warm inside of his mother's womb. And I would say that depiction is pretty accurate. This man, fully grown, still behaves as if he's a baby. However, all the women around him also support that and reinforce and help and aid and abet in his dysfunction. In fact, his dysfunction is quite predictable and totally expected. So let's start in with the opening scene of Yvette, his main baby mama, the mother of his son, coming from an appointment from an abortion clinic. She's hobbled over in pain, both physically and mentally, because once again, Jody, refusing to wear protection, has put her in a situation where she has to get yet another abortion. She's had multiple abortions since the birth of their son because Jody absolutely refuses to do the basic form of protection, and that is to wear a rubber to catch his baby batter. He can't even protect her from himself. So she's upset. He's trying to cater to her. She's not interested. Oh, and did I mention that he had to get the money for her abortion from his mother? And why? Because he ain't got no job. Another problem with this movie is that both Jody's baby mamas, Yvette and Peanut, Yvette has the son, Peanut has the daughter, are both engaged in involuntary man-sharing relationships. They're both sleeping with him. They both have children by him, but they both don't know that he keeps going back and forth between them. We talk about this a lot. In our community, there's a lot of women who are engaged in these multiple partner relationships without their knowledge. Baby boy, Jody, says the one thing that he's good at is making pretty babies. Yeah, he makes pretty babies that he leaves the women to raise for themselves because he absolutely has nothing to contribute. And everybody walks around like it's perfectly normal. But I don't want to just pick on Jody because, it takes two. I want to talk about Yvette for a second. Yvette has an apartment. She's raising her son alone. She has a job. She has a car. She is responsible for 100% of the care of their child together. And she still wants Jody to move in with her. The question is, why? Why is it so important for her to have him to move in with no job, no talk of marriage, no commitment at all, and she wants them to be a family? Why? When she knows that he's actively cheating. I mean, she may not know all of the details because he doesn't tell her, but we find out later that he's a multiple philanderer who sleeps with more than just his other baby's mom, Peanut, but women all over the neighborhood. But still, she wants to make it work with him. Yet she's doing all the providing and the provision. This is very, very similar to what we talk about when we say that Black women are heads of households by 80%. These are the reasons why this happens. And even if we're gainfully employed, like the Brookings Institute study that said, hey, Black women are closing the gap between white women when it comes to wages, but you know what brings us down? Men like Jody. We're taking up the slack for the men who just are not up to snuff. And that is the problem. So Jody actively pulls her down, uses her resources, lives off of her, leaves her to raise the child virtually alone. She has him most of the time. He comes over to visit, have sex, and eat, and that's just about it. And then what do we see? She has a car that she's bought and paid for, buys the insurance. He drops her off to work every morning. And you know what he does when he uses her car? He doesn't use it to look for another job. He doesn't use it to go to school. He uses it to see the other baby mama. And in one scene, we see him visit Peanut, goes into the house and says,
"Fix a nigga something to eat."
Peanut gets up with no balking, with no talking back, and does what she says. Now, what does a man like Jody, what has he done to deserve free sex and free food by two women? What has he done besides provide penis and problems to these women? Absolutely nothing. Yet, both of them comply with this situation because I honestly think they feel like this is as best as they can get. Ladies, stop letting these dusty dudes use your car when you're at work. More than likely, he's pretending that car is his so he can go out on daytime dates with other women. Just don't do it. So just to summarize, Jody is a dusty man with multiple baby mamas who lives with his mother and is very comfortable doing so. He doesn't have a job and exploits the relationships that he has with both the women in his life. Another problematic issue that I found with the movie is that domestic violence is normalized. There are several scenes in which Jody does this during an argument with Yvette. And when he speaks about his mother, who happens to be dating a felon.
Who said you could ask me out? Do you even have an ability?
What?
Being concerned about the fact that this new guy will be moved into the house, he'll be kicked out, and this guy will end up beating her butt like the other men did. Domestic violence is so normalized, they talk about it like it's nothing. It's almost as if it's a form of love. It's just a normal part of the relationship. So in each of these situations, we see Jody, who has not yet hit Yvette, but he threatens to do so. And there are also threats to women by other men in their lives. All of the men are losers. All of the men are bad. 100% bad choices. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So here's the situation. Baby boy is just coasting along. We find out that he's been in jail. Briefly, but not too long. Finds out that his brother was kicked out by his mom and then killed in the streets. It's his nightmare that he will also be killed. Yet, he's doing the things, the risky behaviors that leave him vulnerable to doing those things. There's no discussion of a career. There's no discussion of education. He's just hustling. He's selling weed. And then for a while, he gets this other hustle, selling clothes. Apparently, he's very good at finessing women. We already knew that. He has two baby moms. But instead of actually acquiring the clothes legitimately, he's got this side hustle where he's going to the fashion district in downtown Los Angeles, paying off the truckers to steal the clothes so that he can resell them. That's his career. And that's what Yvette wants as a husband, as a partner, as somebody to live in the house and the father of her child. Girl, stop. The low expectations have got to go. This entire movie is full of struggle love situations where the men are 100% dependent, and I mean 100% dependent on the women. And in this movie also, there's a whole lot of fake hypermasculinity where men are flashing around guns, flashing around penises, but they provide nothing, they bring nothing in, but they want their women to be submissive to them. Does that sound familiar? And they want everything to be catered for their needs. They want to be able to sleep around, to have marriage-type relationships without actually being married. And all of the men depicted in this movie are like that. And when we talk about Black women, you just need to choose better. Well, if this is your entire environment, and let me tell you something, I went to a university not too far from where this movie was shot, so I'm very familiar with the area, and I would say that it depicts it pretty accurately, especially in the project parts of, say, like Baldwin Hills. Yes, there's a few good guys there. I dated one of them. He wrote poetry and he ended up going to UCLA, but guess what? I looked him up on Facebook recently. He's got a kid and he's never been married. So this is an epidemic, and this is something that is just a regular schmegular thing that happens in the community. Even when you're a good guy, you're not doing the basic things that men of other races do just automatically. Now, going back to the domestic violence thing, this is very serious and it was very troubling. I cringed when I saw this. So Jody and Yvette finally get into the argument where he lays hands on her and he smacks her. She's thrown to the ground and crying. He picks her up and takes her into the bedroom and apologizes profusely. He's kissing her all over her face, telling her how much he loves her and how sorry he is. And while she's weeping, he proceeds to take off her pants. He wants to take off her pants and perform sexual acts on her to distract her from the beating he just gave her. That is so cringy and disgusting. But what is going on in this character's mind at the moment? Is he thinking that, okay, so I hit her, and the way to make it better, the way to make everything better is to victimize her? And I thought it was disgusting. None of the women who were hit, which happened regularly, never reported to the police. And here we are as a community having the highest number of unreported domestic violence cases of all races of women. And this movie made it plain why that's the case. Okay, so let's talk about Jody's mother. Beautiful woman, you can tell she had him very early, but she also has problematic romantic relationships. She's currently seeing a felon who's now a lawn guy. He has his own landscaping business. Jody is pretty suspicious of him, but he's mainly worried about himself. He's a very narcissistic point of view where he's worried about his livelihood and his comfort. He's worried that his mother, Juanita, will end up kicking him out because she will choose that man over him. And throughout the movie, we see that he's starting to make his way in, and Jody gets more and more suspicious. At one point, Juanita decides that she wants to grow a beautiful kitchen garden like she saw her grandmothers and her forefathers do. It's a beautiful garden. She's tended it, worked it from the ground up. It's sort of a metaphor, too, because she starts with this naked landscape where she's planting the seeds that will eventually grow and bloom to something beautiful. In the end of the movie, they try to make that parallel, but I'm not buying it. Anyway, so in the garden, when it's growing beautifully, she notices a weed plant. She immediately accuses Jody. I mean, Jody is capable of it. He sells weed and maybe other drugs. It's not Jody, it's the boyfriend. And that's another thing. Black women are in these relationships with convicts, or maybe they haven't even gotten caught yet, that leave them vulnerable for legal trouble. Yes, weed now is legal in California, but it wasn't in 2001. And she could have easily been arrested for possession of an illegal substance or growing and producing an illegal substance because her boyfriend, without her knowledge, used her property, used her resources to grow something illegal and put her in such a vulnerable position. So here we are, all the men of this movie, again, are leaving the women vulnerable because they fail to protect, and they're so unbelievably selfish while they maintain an entitlement of wanting to be a man. And the manliness is often pronounced through hypersexuality, violence, selling drugs, and domestic violence. If that isn't bad enough, let's talk about the R word. So while Jody and Yvette are fighting, Yvette's old boyfriend gets out of jail and is paroled. Unbeknownst to her, he's given his parole officer her address, and he shows up at the door. She decides to let him sleep on the couch, even though he wants to sleep in her bed. He shows an open contempt to her son because it's not his. And while she's at work, he brings in his thug dudes to just eat all of her food and lay up in her house. He even tries to kill the father of her child with Jody because he's jealous and because he just simply doesn't like the kid. He has an open contempt of the child and tries to kill the father. Moreover, he tries to impose himself physically on Yvette and demands that he get a child from her. He demands that she have his baby too. Reproductive coercion. That is a form of domestic violence that we don't often talk about in this community. So when we're in a community where the women are forced to be more masculine and the men are more feminine, what happens is the men, at least some of them, are using typically female tactics of trying to ensnare a woman through pregnancy and a child so that she will be tethered to him indefinitely. That ensures that he's going to have a place to stay, that he's going to have free sex, and that he's going to have resources. It also lowers her sexual market value so that other men won't be so keen to want her. This is what happens in this community, but we don't like to talk about it. But reproductive coercion is rampant. And what we saw with Yvette's ex-boyfriend was him forcing himself upon her while showing open contempt to the child she already had and demanding that he have a child with her as reproductive coercion because the men know that the women have all the resources. And at least in this movie, all the men were totally reliant on the women. Well, at this point, I guess I should just thank John Singleton, I guess, for reinforcing things that we've been talking about for 2 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades. We've been talking about this forever. Thank you, John Singleton, for encapsulating and personifying the issues and concerns and complaints that Black women have been having in regard to this community for eons. That much I can thank you for. However, if this was just a movie that we could just have fun and kiki, it would be different. But these types of movies reinforce messages. They say that art imitates life, but sometimes art perpetuates life. When everything from the music to the speech that we use and the movies and the books and the attitudes and the lexicons and even the fashion reinforce these negative stereotypes, then art is life. It is not pretend. And that is why these types of movies are a problem. It reinforces what's already there and makes it cool. I know there was a lot other problematic scenes in Baby Boy that I wasn't able to get into, and maybe you've seen it recently, or maybe you just remember how bad it was. Let me know if I missed something. I know I did. And you tell me what your interpretation is in regards to why we have these conversations related to divestment and moving away from things that simply no longer serve us and demanding reciprocity. I believe personally that this movie gives the entire argument for why Black women have had enough. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm Crystalline Carey.